Overtime!
All right, I'm Charlie, and today on Overtime Arcade, we're going to spend some quality time with Tempest. Now, this video might be a little bit shorter than normal because I kind of already fixed the problem that I've been having with this machine. Let me put it to you this way. Have you ever been in a relationship where you just keep giving and giving and giving, but the other person really doesn't seem to care about the relationship at all or care about you at all? But every once in a while they throw you a bone, show you some kind of affection or attention that keeps you invested in the relationship and giving more. Well, that's kind of what it's like owning a Tempest arcade machine. So when I first got this machine a couple of years ago, it was a complete project. It needed cabinet work, it needed monitor work, it needed board work. So that's what I did, and it was the most difficult restoration that I've done so far. As you can kind of tell already, the monitor or the cabinet had been sitting in water, and the particle board absorbed a bunch of it. The sides were swollen. I had to chop off the bottom 6 inches on both sides and replace it. It's almost impossible to find the vinyl pattern that was originally on the Tempest Cabaret, the mini machine. So I really haven't finished that up in the bottom. I'll get to that eventually someday. As you can see on the inside, I replaced the bottom of the cabinet itself, completely rebuilt the monitor, cap kit, new transistors, filter caps, LV2000 low voltage replacement board, and the board was a mess too. The board was not working when I got it, but I sort of taught myself a little bit how to work on these things, and eventually got it working. For a while. It was playable, it was working, fully working, but the vectors were a little bit jittery. We'll back up a second. Tempest is a vector game. It has a vector monitor, which actually draws, kind of looks like a wireframe image on the screen, rather than a typewriter like typical raster monitors and most arcade machines, like all of the other ones I have here at my house. The vector monitors draw lines directly on the screen. Atari had made vector games before, like Asteroids, but what was different about Tempest was it was the first color vector game that Atari put out. All the previous vector games were just black and white, like Asteroids. And so the technology here was new at the time in 1981 and not completely, I guess, bulletproof yet. Tempest is notorious for being a pain in the butt to work on. And so, when I had finished the restoration project a couple years ago or so, I thought everything was great except the lines were a little bit jittery, wavy, shaky. They weren't rock solid like you like them to see. And so I spent a bit more time, on the KLOV forums, looking for advice, asking questions. I got some tips, largely from user Andrew B. on KLOV, who's really an expert when it comes to Tempest and other vector games. And for about, 10 minutes, I had it solved. The vectors were rock solid, no jitter, no problem. And I was in the middle of playing a game, and it kind of went haywire on me. Image cut out. I think it was losing vectors for a while and then completely cut out. The coin counter started ticking like crazy, indicating some sort of logic problem. Turned the game off. Turned it back on in test mode and had a math box error, which kind of freaked me out. Turned it off again, reseated a bunch of the chips on the board, and when I tried turning it on again, nothing, just completely dead. And I even damaged the socket that the main CPU and the main board was on, that one right there. And I was kind of devastated. I'd worked so hard to bring this thing back to life, and I was so close. And, kind of crapped out on me. So I actually took almost a 2-year break from this machine. It sat there taunting me with the auto order sign on. And I wasn't really motivated to work on it. But this weekend started digging into it. And, I was checking all my basics again, checking the voltages, which looked good, checking things out. Nothing. You know, I brought out the heavy equipment. I got the original schematics. I got my parts board, which doesn't actually work. This is another Tempest board set. Logic probe, multimeter, of course, even my oscilloscope, which I'm still learning how to use. Throwing all these things at it, you know, doing a ton of research and just getting stumped. You know, was posting questions on KLOV and asking for advice and telling everyone I was seeing. And wouldn't you know, it was a very, very simple fix to get this thing working. So this is the main board. Tempest is a two-board stack. There's a smaller auxiliary board down here. If you can see, I've got the harness pulled out just to make it a little bit easier to work on the board while having it connected to the monitor. Usually are connected to the game. Usually the PCB goes over in that rack there. So this is the main board. Over here we have the main CPU. You can see that it's the only chip on this board that sort of goes north-south. All the other ICs on the board, the ROM chips, etc., all are oriented east to west. This was the chip where I kind of damaged the socket when I pulled it out and reseated it. You know, I was using my logic probe trying to see what was going on with that CPU, tracing. I was, you know, thinking maybe there was some sort of clock issue, right? You know, I wasn't getting any kind of reset signal. And Vector Collector on the KLOV forums sort of jokingly suggested maybe your CPU's in backwards. And he was right. When I went through this board 2 years ago, reseating all these chips, I put the CPU in backwards. And that's what it was. So if you can see, I don't know if it's kind of dark here, there's a little notch here on this chip, this IC, sort of indicates where the top of it is, right? You see these other ones here have notches here and here. That sort of tells you the correct orientation. And usually for socketed chips, or really any chips, on the board it'll be silkscreen a design to indicate which is the correct orientation. And I completely screwed it up and put it in backwards in my haste when I was panicking about the board when it stopped working 2 years ago. And so that's how it was for 2 years, sitting there like that. And that's how it was when I was trying to get it working again this weekend. And once I flipped that around and put it in the right way, guess what? It started working. Yeah, that's what it was. Kind of ridiculous. I feel like a total idiot, but that's what it was, you know. And then, you know, obviously I checked the voltages on the board, you know, the X and Y output voltages for the vectors. You never want to plug a game right into a monitor, a vector monitor, unless you know it's putting out safe voltages. Vector games are more complicated than raster games. You know, there's a much deeper interdependency between the boards generating the vectors and the monitor. Wells Gardner K6100 in this case up here. You know, things that seem to be board issues could actually be monitor issues. Things that seem to be monitor issues could actually be board issues. The board can damage the monitor if it puts out the wrong voltages, so you got to be really careful. Andrew B, again, from the KLOV forums, has a very extensive guide on how to test a vector board like Tempest to make sure it's putting out safe voltages before connecting it to your vector monitor, and how to safely bring up that vector monitor. I'll put a link to that in the video description. But yeah, everything checked out once I flipped that CPU in the correct orientation. The voltages looked good. The game looked good on the oscilloscope here. I was able to bring up the game in test mode properly. Hooked it up to the monitor, and it worked. So let's just pull this interlock switch here. And once it warms up, you will see Tempest playing on this monitor. And all it was the CPU being in backwards. You see that? Look at that. Let me pull this sign off of here, because Tempest is working. There you go. We're in a track mode. That's it. And you see how that looks like a kind of a 3D wireframe. Tempest is a shooter. It's a tube shooter. So you go around the outside here, that little yellow ship. The enemies are coming at you from these series of tubes, and you're shooting down at them. You move on to the next one, and different levels have different sort of patterns for that tube. It has a sort of a unique spinner here. I think it was one of the first games to have a spinner to control the ship left and right. A fire button, which does have turbo auto fire. Super zapper, you can use once per level to kill everything currently on the screen. Obviously 1 and 2 player buttons. But yeah, that's all it was. The CPU was in backwards. And once I flipped it around, it started working again. Kind of. Two more issues that were left. One is the game was resetting. So, I don't know, every 10 minutes or so, the game would kind of reset on you and just sort of, in the blink of an eye, end your game, go blank for a second, and then return to the sort of beginning kind of, game over screen. I think what that was when the chip was in backwards and I had the game on testing it. There were obviously voltages going places that they shouldn't have been on that CPU. So I swapped out that original 6502A chip with a new one, a refurbished one that I got from arcadepartsandrepair.com. And since I did that, I've had no issues with the game resetting, which is great and quite a relief. The other issue I've had, and this is more of an intermittent one, which are the best kind of issues to have, is I'm still getting some jitter on these the vectors every once in a while. Sometimes it gets really, really shaky, really, really wavy in both axes, both X and Y. And sometimes it's rock solid, like what you're seeing here. No jitter whatsoever, which is great. But when it's not working, it's bouncing all over the place. And, if this happens, while I'm filming, I'll be sure to show some of that. But, yeah. So why don't we do a couple of things? Why don't I show you how a couple of these tools work that I have used for working on Tempest. Let me get the tripod set up for that, and we'll dig into that. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is use my digital multimeter to test the X and Y output voltages. So like I mentioned, Andrew B's guide on how to safely bring up a 6100 vector monitor says that you've got to check your X and Y output voltages and make sure they're in between somewhere between 2 and 4 volts of AC. So we can test that with our multimeter. So there's test points on the board. We're going to hook up our black probe to the ground test point right there. And then the X and Y output test points are right here. So here's the X. And we see down here, if you can see it, it's bouncing around because it'll change, as different vectors are being drawn. But we're seeing that it's, it gets below 2 a little bit, but then, up in the 3s and around 4. Sometimes it'll jump over 4. So that looks pretty good. Take that off, hook it up to the Y output, which is usually a little bit higher. You saw it was 3.8 there for a second. So as long as it's not jumping sort of into 5 or above, you're in good shape. So this is looking okay. Next thing we're going to do is use our logic probe, or use my logic probe. And obviously you can check different voltages on the PCBs, the sort of main power, 5 volts, 15 volts, that sort of thing. So the next tool we're going to use is a logic probe. This is an Elenco, if that'll focus. There we go. Elenco Logic Probe LP560. You can get this for 20 bucks on Amazon, which is great. So this has 2 probes you have to connect to your ground and your 5 volts. So it gets its power actually right from the, from the board itself. So we'll do that. Hook that up to ground. Come on. Hook that up to 5 volts. So a couple different settings here. We've got it on pulse. We've got it on TTL for transistor logic. And then, for example, we can go over to our CPU and put the probe, or the sort of pointy end of the logic probe, up on a pin, and we can see if there's any activity on that leg. So that one is high, for example. That one's high as well. That one's pulsing. All right. That one's low. All right. Well, kind of hard to do while I'm reaching sort of across myself, not to get in front of the camera. But you sort of see how that works. You can see if there's activity going on a pin, whether it's stuck high, stuck low, pulsating. It'll make different sounds for different frequencies of the pulse. So that's good for telling if there's activity going on an IC on a chip. So the last tool I'm going to sort of show you is the oscilloscope, which takes a little bit more work to set up. So let me go and do that, and I'll be right back. Okay, this is my Tektronix 2246 100 megahertz oscilloscope that I got on eBay a while back. I can't remember what I spent on it, maybe $100, maybe $200. And I got this because it has XY mode. You can see right here, whoops, that it's in. And it's useful for hooking up to vector games and seeing what's coming from the outputs, right? So the oscilloscope screen right here kind of works a little bit like a vector monitor. It'll draw the image that it's getting from the vector game on the screen. So you can see what's coming off of the game without hooking it up to your monitor and potentially damaging your monitor. So when I got this, it was just the unit. It was, the eBay listing says it was, tested and working. I had to grab a power cord from it, just a sort of regular computer cord. And I bought a couple of 100 megahertz probes to use. So let me show you how I hook this up. Move you over here so you can see what's going on. So this first probe is hooked up to the channel 1 or X input on the oscilloscope. And it's got two ends. It's got the probe end, which has a little hook on it. And it's got a grounding connection here, like an alligator clip. So I will clip the grounding clip onto the ground test point, and I will hook up this first probe lead onto the X output test point. And then I will grab the second probe, which is hooked up to channel 2, which is going to be our Y-axis. I will again connect the grounding clip to the ground point on the test board and hook up the probe itself, the lead, to the Y output test point. And now if we come over here, we can see that the oscilloscope is playing Tempest. Isn't that kind of cool? So a couple things to point out. The image is backwards, which is normal. That's what it's going to look like on an oscilloscope. Like I said, I've got it set to XY mode right here. Channel 1 is our X input. Channel 2 is our Y input. You can see Tempest right there, but it's backwards. And so, you can use this to kind of help, diagnose if you have, the machine in a working state, if it's displaying a correct image, producing a correct image, or garbage. To do that before, like I said, hooking it up to your very, very expensive, fragile vector monitor and potentially damaging it with bad inputs. You can, change the sort of size and shape of the image by messing with the volts. I don't even know what that stands for. Like I said, I'm still just learning this oscilloscope. You can change the position sort of up and down and left and right. But yeah, useful for taking a look at the video output being produced by the vector board before hooking it up to your vector monitor. So yeah, the game is working. Like I said, we've got a good image on the screen. I've been playing a couple different rounds here. What we should do? I always like to set the settings on the game for the Twin Galaxies tournament settings. Not that I am particularly good at playing any of these games, but if I ever do get good, I want to practice on the settings that count for world records and that sort of stuff. And Twin Galaxies is the one of the authorities when it comes to that sort of thing. So why don't I go grab those settings and we'll put those onto the dip switches on the board. Okay, Tempest has 4 different sets of dip switches, 4 banks of dip switches that control various settings for the game. There's 3 here on the main PCB, like you can see, and there's 1 on the back side on the auxiliary board. So one of these, this is the switch bank at position, what is it? K10, K11. This really just controls the behavior of the coin counters. I've got that set properly already, and Twin Galaxies doesn't actually care about it. On the back, on the auxiliary board, there is a 4 switch or 4 toggle dip switch bank. I've got that one set properly already. That controls the difficulty. Twin Galaxies has it set to hard for tournament play, so that's what it's set at. And so all we really need to do right now is look at these 2 banks of 8 dip switches. So Twin Galaxies says that for the 8 toggle switch at position L12 on the main board, they should all be set to on. So L12 is right here. They're all set to on, so that's great. L12 controls the number of lives you get per game, which should be 3. When you are granted a bonus life, which is every 20,000 points, the language should be English, and it should be a 1 credit minimum play. So all 8 of those are on. Up is on this this bank of dip switches. So L12 is all set. And then the last thing to look at is, again, the 8 toggle switch at position N13, which is right here, N13. And this controls how many games you get per coin, right? And those should all be on as well. I've actually got number 7 off, which I think that makes it free play when you do that. But when it's on, when 7 and 8 are on, it's 1 coin for 1 credit. So that was pretty easy. So we've got the Twin Galaxies tournament play dip switch settings. I was doing all of this with the game on, of course, or game off, of course, which is highly recommended, having the game off whenever you're switching or changing dip switch settings. So let's turn the game back on and confirm that those settings took hold. We'll come over here. There we go. Usually it resets the high score, so why don't we actually do that? I'll come down here. Inside the coin door is our coin counter, and this one is on 23,472 number of quarters that have been dropped into this machine. I can turn the test switch on. This is the service credit, and this is the volume pot. So now we're in. Maybe I don't have the difficulty dip switch set properly, because that says medium right here. So let me go and fix that and come right back. Goodness gracious, I gave myself a heart attack there for a second. So got the dip switch settings on the aux board set. I don't know, I had screwed them up. I think I had read the numbers upside down or something. So I got those set. Obviously had to disconnect the edge connector out from both boards in order to flip it over and change that dip switch setting. And when I turned the game back on, the spot killer light came on the deflection board. Just have the LV 2000 lights on right there. So if there's a red LED sort of over on this side of your deflection board, that's a bad sign. That's a spot killer light. That means the monitor is not displaying any signal at all, to avoid having just one sort of really intense dot in the middle of the monitor burn a hole there. So that scared me. Thought I had screwed something up somehow. These things are as fragile as glass. But yeah, I reseated the edge connector on both boards, turned the game back on, no spot killer, and we've got Tempest again. So that's great. So let's, again, turn the test switch back on, and we are on the test screen. Let's see. Game is set to hard difficulty, which is great. 1 coin for each play, which is what I like. And yeah, so let's turn the test off. The high scores have been reset, obviously because I changed the difficulty. So Tempest is ready to play. So why don't we stick it back into its slot in the lineup and maybe play a couple of games of Tempest. Boy, does that look good running again in the lineup. Oh, Tempest, how I missed you. This tempestuous Tempest, this temperamental Tempest. And sorry if you're disappointed that we didn't really fix anything in this episode. Don't worry, Tempest will be having problems again in the future. I can guarantee it, and we'll work on them together there. But yeah, doesn't it look great? Again in the lineup. Sorry if you're seeing the play choice down. Sometimes I have to film these episodes kind of out of order. But wow, I am so glad, so glad to see Tempest working again. So as promised, let's play a couple of games here. And if I can get, sorry if you're getting seasick. All right, I think that should pretty much do it. All right, let's play some Tempest. Coin up. So, all right, 1 credit. 1 player button is flashing. So Tempest is kind of cool that it lets you choose your difficulty level from the beginning. We'll pick the easiest for now, just so you can see what it looks like at the start. Go and kill all these easy bad guys. There we go, cleared the first board. Didn't even have to use our supercharger, our super zapper. I'm kind of playing mindlessly. All right, second is clear. It just gets harder and harder from here. There's my super zapper. Those purple guys break up into red ones. All right, we're on to level 4. Hopefully you can see all this. There's 16 levels per wave. Whoop! Got hit. 16 levels per, I don't know, stage or something. The first one is the blue one. The second one is red. I've never got hit again because I'm talking. I've never made it to the third one. Each of the 16, watch out for the spikes. Each of the 16 levels is a different shape. Each of the different stages or whatever are different colors. This is the blue one, like I said. I am definitely not the best Tempest player, really, any video game. So that was it, and that was fireworks. Tell us we got a high score. Yippee! So we'll put our initials in. For me is CFG. Being very careful not to accidentally hit the wrong thing. Here we go. Let's play another game. That wasn't so good. This is not the how to play Tempest video. All right, coined up. Let's go to the hardest one. And if we clear this, because we skipped ahead, we'll get a 54,000 point bonus right from the start, which would be nice. But if we die, we get no bonus. Or if we die, lose all our lives in this level. I know there's something about having an acute angle and being able to survive. Like I said, I had been testing this on medium, so that's what I've been getting used to lately, but a coin got stuck. Hard is what you should be playing on for the, what you call it? Come on. Give me my money back. Oh, we got a coin stuck in there. Hard is what you should be playing on for the Twin Galaxy tournament setting. So one more game here. Let's see if we can at least get to the next board, next level. Nope, not right there, not like that. And I love how rock solid the vectors are looking right now. No wave, no nothing, no wobbliness, which makes me feel good. There we go. Cleared the level. Every 20,000 points we get an extra life, but it doesn't aggregate. So it's actually a strategy to scoring just under 6,000 points on that first board before you clear it to get to the second, so that you can get 2 lives. One for, I think that gives you an extra life for making it to the next level on that one, and another one for hitting 60,000. So I won't be lasting much longer here. This is kind of the how not to play Tempest. Oh my god. Yep. All right, well, that about does it for this episode of Overtime Arcade. I hope you enjoyed watching, and we'll see you next time. It's good to have you back, Tempest.
Overtime!